And that's the fight I deal with every day of my life. Fighting with that reality of knowing that you cannot accept one without the other. Otherwise, it's pure denial. Crazy people wouldn't recognize that. I do, because I'm not crazy. I had an epiphany today in a moment of meditating. And in this epiphany, what I realized was that if I don't tell this story, it would be in vain. Mostly because the way it happened was my choice. My choice in a heavy burden to do something absolutely insane. This testimony that you're about to hear is something that may be considered difficult to stomach, will probably even be hard to believe. I want to tell my story because I went into hell for that exact reason. Not to make a video about it, but to know whether or not it was real. I've meditated on this for quite some time, and it's been a little over a year since it happened. A lot of people think that you have to die to go to hell, but this is not true. You actually can go to hell through different dimensions, even in sleep state. You can go to hell in different dimensions, even when you're physically awake. The problem is that even though religion glorifies the idea of hell and inflicting people with fear to bring them back into their church every Sunday or every week, the biggest tragedy that I've come to understand and face in my day-to-day life is that when you share your experience of that exact place, people think you're crazy. And that's exactly the biggest reason why I had held from talking about it out loud in an official video like this. I thought for a while maybe I should just wait and write a book about it. But the truth is, if I do, or when I do, it will be not of my testimony, but of what to expect of hell. But I'm not ready for that yet. For writing something like that would be extremely heavy on the heart, on my mind, and on my soul, and I know that. Forgive me if I don't look at the camera that often, and the fact that I have no makeup on or that I don't seem very presentable. This decision came right out of the blue. This decision came right after meditating, and I did not plan this, and I've decided to just jump right in and just do it. Because I know deep down that it has to come out eventually, and if I think about it too much, if I prepare too much, I may back out. Because the experience is so difficult to talk about. It's so overwhelming. And for me, my purpose to share my story is in hopes that it saves a soul, even one, from a horrible fate. Don't do what I did. Don't be as curious as I was. I was told by my guides that there was no hell. As crazy as that is, a lot of angels never talked to me about hell, and my spirit guides, even Jesus, Yehoshua, avoided the concept or the talk of hell at all whatsoever. Even when I would bring it up, he avoided it all the time. And at some points, he would even say that hell was in the mind, but not so much a place. I knew deep down he wasn't being honest with me. And that's what brought me to decide to jump into the portal, a portal of hell. The only thing that matters is that when I went in there, I knew that I had made instantly probably the number one worst mistake of my entire existence. I know that a lot of people are wondering, why in the world would you jump into that realm? Why didn't Jesus tell you? You know, some people would say that wasn't the real Jesus. It was. I still talk to him regularly in dreams, and we are always healing. I'm always healing from this experience. And I always ask him all the time, why didn't you tell me the truth? And I get angry because I think it could have been prevented. But then he told me, as he tells me repeatedly, with angels and with my guides, that he foresaw me being in hell. And so he was worried that him talking about it would bring more curiosity, and then I would go into hell. So he thought that avoiding it would save me, but it only made my curiosity grow more. A lot of people talk about hell as if they've been there, and there are very few people that in their testimonies are telling the truth. But there's a lot of people in the world that preach about a place they've never really been to, they've never really seen. And they'll use fear of that place, that you'll be damned there, to keep people in check from making sinful decisions. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a person of a traditional faith. My faith is love in the universe and in humanity and in celestial beings and other beings in the universe that exist. So my testimony as I go forward, please keep in mind that what I'm sharing with you has nothing to do with a religious concept, because it has no correlation to that whatsoever. I've been with all kinds of beings. I've met Egyptian gods. I've been in the company of Hindu gods. I've been in the company of Jesus Christ. I've been in the company with many other beings in the course of the universe that do exist. And they all share one of the most important factors, that all share an important message. And that message is part of my testimony today. To be fully honest with you, I don't even know where to begin with this. I don't even know what to tell you of how it went about in there. But I will say that when you go into hell, the time lapse in hell versus the other dimensions is incredibly fast and incredibly slow, all at the same time. The moment I entered hell, it was extremely hot. So unbearably hot that it felt as if my skin was melting off. I know that that seems weird when you're in a plane, in a different dimension, a different realm, and you don't have a body. Hell is the lowest level of dimensions. And this level of dimension is why it's so real, because it's the lowest plane in existence. So everything is extremely physical, even more physical than here. Everything is more painful than here. Hell is a realm that is more dense than even Earth. Hell is the lowest level realm you can go to. I don't know a whole lot about how it works. So if you're expecting all of those answers, I don't have all the answers about that. What I'm going to share with you is the only information that I know, that I have discovered, at least for now. Any other information that I were to receive in the future would be by my guides, not because I went back to hell. Hopefully not. When I was in hell, all I remember the most when I first entered hell was absolute fear. And what people don't understand is that this realm is harnessed in nothing but fear. Fear, anger, anguish, pain, suffering, sadness, loneliness, so much amplification. It's so amplified by a billion zillion emotions, and it's so strong and it's so overwhelmingly powerful. You cannot overcome that. Not even me, not even Jesus. It's that bad of a realm. When I first entered, was sweating profusely immediately when I got there. It was so overwhelmingly hot. There was flames, there was fire, there was gravel and dust and grime, like you couldn't breathe in there. It was so overwhelming. Even though when you go to these planes and in consciousness, whether dead or alive, and you're traveling there, we have what's called the astral body that's separate from this body. Our soul is a part of the astral body. And so when we astral travel, we can go to different planes all the time. So that's how I got there, was my astral body went there. All of a sudden, I just want to shut down. I don't want to talk about it at all. There's a part of me where I'm already regretting making this video because I don't even know where to begin with what happened to me. The thing about hell is that the time lapse there is so complicated. Everything that they did to me in this realm was so painfully slow, unbelievably slow. So slow that it felt like hours and hours and hours of torture, but then they would show you a clock and barely a second went by, and they would continue. There were demons that smelled us out, smelled anyone else who was there, and I tried to hide from them, and I tried to protect myself in golden white light. I tried to shield any way they could detect me, but it was impossible. The energy there is so bad. The worst energy plane I've ever been to. When they found me, there were a lot of demons, and they were dragging me, and they tried to figure out what they were going to do to me because they knew that I had jumped in. They heard about it. When a person, anyone that is not authorized to jump into those portals, they get a notification immediately. It's almost like a sensor and energy frequency throughout their realm. It's very, very sensitive. And so they knew that my energy was not like theirs, so they detected it and immediately went to that realm, to that area where I was. And they could sniff my fear. They could smell, they could taste my fear. They literally would sit there and say these things because I was hiding behind rock and rubble, praying that they weren't going to find me, but I knew they would. And when they did, I tried to fight them off, and in some cases I was able to, because I've learned a few things from my guides on how to protect yourself in these in situations. But unfortunately, when you are surrounded by so many demons that are incredibly powerful, you are no match for them. They immediately could seep into my frequency of fear, and they took advantage of that. And they began to do all kinds of horrible things. They would manifest an illusion of my daughter, and then they would start torturing her. And they would do horrible things. I don't want to say the details of that because it has to do with my daughter. Was she hurt for real? Like, was she actually there? No. But they liked that torture in my mind because it made me even more upset. And then at some point, that's when they began to gang rape me. When you're raped by demons in that situation, it's one of those things that I tell myself it never happened, because I don't want to go back to that negative place that I was there. But the more I continue, I'm nervous that you're going to see a lot more that I don't want you to see. When you're gang raped by demons, when you're raped by demons, even by one demon, it's extremely painful. The pain is so excruciating that it feels like the insides of your body are being ripped apart. It feels as if you're losing your organs. And they do that in a way to make you feel disempowered. It makes you feel vulnerable. And they like it when you have pain. They like it when you're screaming in agony. They get a rise in that. And then they can alter your mind and make you believe that you like it when you don't. And when they do that, they'll start making it even worse. When demons rape a person, they drain your energy, and that's what they were doing with me. They were immediately taking my energy and sucking my energy out as they were raping me. But it wasn't just gang rape of 3 or 4. It was like many. And they would take turns. So there was a long line. And sometimes they wouldn't wait, and they would end up continuing. And there's parts of it where I remember vividly, and then there's parts that I blacked out because it was so painful. There was a part where I do recall I was taken to this demon king, King Payman, because he and I had a past in other demon haunting situations and other situations that I had made in the past, mistakes that I had made in the past, and they thought that this was funny, so they brought me to this demon king. And when I was in his presence, he took me to this room, and I was in this one particular room probably the most. It was a torture room. Now granted, every room was a torture room. Every space that you're in hell is a torturous space, because that's the only thing they focus on. But when I got there, they broke me down. That was their goal. That was Payman's goal. And because he's in charge of many, many legions, he would tell them what to do to me. Was when they began to torture me, and he just threw me into this space, and I was already so drained of energy. I don't want to say these details, but I know I need to. Because the truth of the matter is, if I don't put in these details, you're not getting the full-fledged reality of what this realm is like. When I was in this room, I was already badly beaten, mangled, and covered in semen. I was completely drenched, and they thought that was funny. So they began to so-called clean me up. And what they would do is they would start with my hair. This one particular demon, he was short, and he looked like this big fat goblin kind of being. Big nose, really ugly face, broken fingers, in some case kind of very dark skinned, but kind of reddish toned a little bit, but more dark skinned. This entity almost looked burned. This demon almost looked like he had been burned and battered. He had this horrible, disgusting voice. This voice I don't think I will ever forget. The sarcasm, the apathy, their eyes, the teeth, the skin, the smell. It was unbelievable. I just remember then this demon had a few other demons, and they strapped me to this table, this metal table, and it wasn't clean. Nothing in this realm was clean. Everything was dirty, raunchy, grotesque, disgusting, moldy, bugs everywhere, all kinds of disgusting things. There was blood, there was pus, there was all kinds of these disgusting things that you can think of. There was vomit all the time. It always smelled of vomit. And from what I remember, they said it was because of all the torture they do to people that smell would permeate the whole area. But they also like those smells. They like this. And when I was on this table, I couldn't move at all. I had no energy. So in these realms, when you have no energy, you don't have a physical body, but the energy still allows you to move about in other realms. And when you are depleted of a certain amount of energy, mostly positive energy, they psychically take all that away from you to make you very numb, to make you very lethargic and tired and unable to move. It makes you dizzy. It can make you black out. You can actually black out in these realms. And I remember that when they put me on this table, I was laying on my back. They strapped me down, so my arms were strapped down and I was strapped on this table. My legs were strapped down. I think they had one on my forehead. I can't remember if it was, but they were arguing about that because what they were going to do. I remember this demon touching my hair. He was like, maybe we should wash this hair, this pretty hair of yours. Maybe we should just get rid of it. And he knew that was insecurities that I had about my hair, that I had insecurities about how I looked, all these kinds of insecurities. They read all of that. And then that's when it took out this tray, and he had all of these different kinds of tools, torture tools, even blunt knives and sharp knives. Nothing was sharp. Everything was blunt. Like everything was withered and rusted and really badly taken care of. And the reason why they would have it this way is because it makes the pain a lot worse. I will never forget the pain. I will never forget this moment. This entity decided to cut all my hair off, and he did. And then he started shaving my hair off. But he didn't use a razor. He used a blade. And at some points, I remember he decided to, he took off my skin, off my whole head. He skinned my head. He started cutting my head very slowly. And then he knew how painful it was for me to watch this, and he decided, oh, you know what, we're gonna do it this way. They unstrapped me and then flipped me over and strapped me down again, so I was laying on my stomach. Some of them wanted to rape me while I was strapped down, but he was like, no, that's not what's ordered by payment by the king. He would use that. He said maybe later, facing the ground. And I still remember looking at the ground. And I remember looking at this table, and I remember just screaming uncontrollably. And he would just start from the back of my head or even at the top. And he would start to slice my forehead open. And then he would start to slowly take the blade and skin my head. And he would skin and take and peel off and slice my head, slice my skin off my skull. I would watch the blood drip down, and I couldn't stop screaming. And the worst part about it was that when this was happening, he decided to be a total asshole, really. And when it felt like hours, I thought he was already done. There was a point where I was screaming so bad that I blacked out. And then I'd wake back up and it's still going on. And then he would show me the clock. And they don't need time, but they knew that is what would cause my mind to go even worse. He would show me when it started, before it started. And then he would show me, why are you whining? It hasn't even been a whole second. He would go like this. It hasn't even been a whole second. Look at the time. Whenever I brush my hair, I still think about that moment. When I put my hair up, I think about that moment. Anytime I mess with my hair, I think about that moment. The pain was so unbearable. When that was through, he took this broken mirror, this disgusting mirror, and he would show me my face as I was strapped to this table. And he would put it underneath me, and I'd be forced to see. And when I would try to look away, that's when they flipped me over. And they used this other device. Because they were like, "You're blinking too much. We don't want you to look away. We want you to see our masterpiece. We're sculpting you." He took scissors and he cut off my eyelids. So even when I was in pain, I couldn't blink. I couldn't look away from what was going on. The pain. You can't fathom what it's like. They would even take these needles and put them in my eye. They would take pliers and rip out my teeth. They broke my fingers, chopped them off with these dull knives. It would break off my toes. They would take these other devices, and what they did was they would put me through other torture chambers, torture devices, because they would get bored. So then they strapped me to this chair, and they started cutting my fingers off one by one. Not all of them, but a few of them. They broke my legs. I know they did something with my legs, but to be honest, that wasn't the most painful. As crazy as that sounds, there was other devices that were a lot more lucid in my mind. There was even a situation where they put me in this fire room, and they would lock me in this room, and it would just go ablaze, and I wouldn't be able to get out, and I was just catching on fire. And I would go on fire over and over and over, and to the point where I was ash. And then I would painfully come back to life, like in this realm somehow. And then the fire would start again, and I would begin to melt again. And they must have done this what felt like 100 times. I don't even know how many times, but I know that it was so many times that there was a point where I started meditating in this heat, and I started thinking about Jesus. I started thinking about love. I started thinking about how you can transmutate, how you can change heat into something positive, like an element. And it started to work. And I started to become one with the fire to where it actually didn't hurt me anymore. And they didn't like that. And so they would yank me out of that place. And then they put me in these other chambers where they would make sure that that wouldn't happen again. And there was this torture devices that they used. There was one in particular where I remember specifically where they would stretch my body out. And some of these were used during the witch trials. And they knew that that was kind of my fear. And so they used that against me. They would begin to stretch my arms, my limbs apart. This other device that they use that I do remember for sure is that they put this thing on top of my head, and it was called the skull crusher. I'll never forget that one. If you don't know what it is, it's probably one of the worst devices ever used, or that was ever used on the victims in the witch trials. What it does and what it did was they put this big heavy metal thing on top of me, on my head. It's very heavy. I couldn't stand because it was so heavy, so they kept me strapped in this thing. And because I couldn't hold my head up, they would put this thing against my neck, practically like a very sharp object. I don't know if it actually was stuck in my neck. It may have, I can't remember. But I know it really hurt. When this device went on my head, they began to crank it. I'm not entirely sure how it works. I just know that very painfully, it began to close on my skull. And as this happened, I could feel my brain, my mind, my brain, and my eyes begin to bulge. And my forehead and my teeth began to break. I could feel blood gushing out my ears. I could feel all this pain, all this anguish. I was in so much pain. I couldn't even scream. I couldn't even cry. I mean, I tried and I did, but every time when I cried, it hurt because my mouth was broken. My teeth were broken. And even though they ripped out my teeth, they didn't rip out all of them. So it would crush inside in my jaw and my gums and my skull. And I was in so much pain that's when they decided to show me a mirror again. I was sitting at this one spot. I don't know exactly where I was. And I remember just being in so much pain, crying so bad. And then I would mentally focus so hard as I ever could to tell myself, pain is only what you tell it is. And so I would continually try to meditate in a way to tell myself I'm not in pain. So I would focus on I'm okay, I'm healed. And slowly but surely it was a little bit better, but they would make sure that it immediately went back to painful. This same demon came up to me and he was saying, "Oh, don't cry. You're so beautiful. Don't you want to see what you've become?" And then he held up that same mirror and I lost it. I was unrecognizable. I could not recognize my face. I could not recognize myself. My scalp was skinned. They left like back of it kind of my hair down, so it almost looked like I had like this bald head, but it was skinned, so you could see blood and my brain, and you could see my eyes were bulged out of its sockets, and my nose was broken, and my cheeks were swollen and deformed, and there were parts where it felt like it was like all jagged and messed up. I couldn't even talk. And I just remember that the second I saw it, I screamed so loud. I could not believe that that's what I turned into. There are other things that happened that I will never tell a soul, because most people unfortunately will judge me too harshly and they won't understand how hell really works. And so I refuse to say too much. I refuse to say too much, because if I do, I will get unfair and unnecessary judgment that is not okay. People on this planet make fun of people that are tortured. People on this planet, even stand-up comedians and people in movies, make jokes about rape and sex trafficking. And yet, we find that in our society funny, even though it's an actual physical thing that we know is wrong. Yet we make a mockery of it. So how could I even allow myself to put myself in a position where most humans in this planet can't even comprehend that level of torture, cannot comprehend that level of pain? Even just the basics of compassion people lack. Just the basics of empathy people are empty in some areas, in a lot of areas, because their ego gets in the way. And they tell themselves, oh, it's a joke, it's funny, ha ha ha. But that's not funny. And that's why I decided this today, was realizing I have to be careful on how much I give you, because I know deep down, if I say too much, a lot of people are not going to be able to comprehend the responsibility it takes to listen to this kind of story, the maturity it takes to respect this kind of testimony, the wisdom it takes to receive this information with respect and dignity of that person who gave it to you. For me, I never judge a person who claims in any sort of way that they were tortured or they went through other horrible situations, even a testimony of hell. And I'll be honest, the truth is that there were parts of me where I didn't want to believe their stories. There were parts of me where I didn't want to believe people's testimonies of hell because deep down I feared it was true. So I would tell myself these people were wrong, or they were misguided, or they were lying. But deep down I knew they were telling the truth. Their eyes said it all. Christianity didn't make up hell. I think it's funny when I hear Satanists and demon worshippers, and they claim that the reason why they decided to go into Satanism is because they disagree with hell, and they disagree with Satan, and the fear and the propaganda and the agenda in Christianity. And I agree with a lot of that, but at the same time I knew deep down there was an evil place. I just didn't want to believe that level of hatred, that level of evil really did exist, because that made it so much more valid. That made it so much more real. It's not only real, it's actually happening in this time, right now, every second of every day. A soul is being tortured in hell. And my mind cannot comprehend those souls, those poor souls being tortured every second of every day. I know what that's like because I was there. I know what that's like because I actually met a lot of those souls, a few of them, in hell that are still there. I spoke with people that they told me they were Satanists. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And they thought that selling their soul was a good idea. Thankfully though, Archangel Michael was able to get some of the souls they met out. But what people don't understand is that to get one soul out takes thousands of angels. It takes so many angels to get one or even a handful of souls out. It's almost impossible. And they try to do this all the time, but it's very hard to do. So that's one of the biggest reasons why it's so important for me to speak this story, because God forbid a person decides to go into this situation and decide that maybe it's a good idea, and when they die they realize they're doomed. I thought I was doomed. I thought I was never getting out. I thought my body was going to die and I'd be stuck in there forever. But thankfully I was luckily able to be rescued, and Archangel Michael and a lot of angels got me out, and a few other souls. When I was finally taken out, I just remember crying hysterically. And there were so many souls that immediately surrounded me, and these other souls. These beings that were professionals and able to heal a soul and to help them and just surround them with love. That's the only way to heal a soul, is with love. And even then it was still so overpowering that there were some souls that couldn't take the pain that I was going through, and they'd have to rotate. I remember Jesus, Yahushua, he pulled me off the floor gently, and he wrapped me up in his arms, and he rocked me like a little baby. And I just sat there crying, but like, he had so much love. And there was so many other beings that did this with me. They would rotate. They'd even sing to me, and I couldn't stop crying. It felt like days. And what they did was, when they envelop you into their arms, their soul blends in with yours, and they take you to a heaven realm in their consciousness, and you can feel all their love, and you get so enveloped in that. You get so healed so fast, but it doesn't heal entirely. There's still wounds, there's still scars. What I didn't know, and I found this out later on from Archangel Michael, because I said I don't know how long I was in hell. It felt like a very long time, but I don't know how long I was there. And I remember Michael did calculations. He sat there and he said, you need to give me a few minutes. I need to calculate exactly how long you were in hell's timeline. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, hell's timeline is very different from any other realm timeline. Even though technically there's no time on the other realms, in hell there is a timeline, because it's specifically designed that way to make torture last longer in a shorter amount of time and in a longer amount of time. It's very weird. I feel like I'm being burned on my stomach. Ow! I remember then Michael turned back around because he was calculating with other angels. And he had this sad face. And I remember he said, Melinda, he said the number, but even I can't remember the number. But I know he said it was somewhere over 1,000 or 2,000 years. I actually can't remember the number. And frankly, the number really doesn't matter, but on Earth's time, that's how long it would have felt like for me in hell. So that's how long in hell's time I was there. And I know that seems strange, but basically 1 minute here or 1 second here, it's like 100 years. I'm not exaggerating that. So that's one of the biggest dilemmas with that realm, is that's why when people come out and say their testimonies, it may seem like, how is that even remotely possible? You're lying, you're making it up. That's how the realms are, that's how the realm is set up. That's how it works. And I'll tell you one thing, when I got told that, I was like overwhelmed, blown away, and I cried, but at the same time, I was trying to tell myself, well, it doesn't change what happened. Okay, that's what that was. It was hard to process that. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of other things that happened to me in hell. There was a point where I was there for so long that I actually felt like I was a demon. There was a point where I began to act very animalistic. I wasn't myself. And I would start to be used to the idea of being a slave in some cases. And they would have chains on my neck or on my legs. And there was even a case where I befriended some of the demons because you started to see a likeness in them because I was there for so long. I started to be friends with some of the demons, that even one in particular began to protect me. And I appreciated that of that demon, but does that make them any nicer even if they did that? No. They're still demons. This all happened in one night of sleep. This whole experience happened in one night's sleep, but when I would wake up from this experience, I didn't remember it. And my guides had made sure that I wouldn't remember it all at once because they were trying to suppress it so that way I could get little bits and pieces. But eventually, unfortunately, all of it started coming out. A lot of it did. At least it felt that way because it was so overwhelming. I would cry uncontrollably at night for hours. It was very difficult for me to comprehend the amount of torture that I had undergone. I do know at some point they would force me to be continually raped by these other demons when I was strapped on that table. And they would flip me over, and sometimes they would force me to be gang raped by multiple demons, or they would all hold me down and there'd be one demon raping me. And these rapes were extremely painful. It wasn't like a human-sized demon. These demons were so big. I can't even tell you how large these monsters were. And some of them were shaped like insects. Some of them were shaped like a worm. One was shaped almost like a dragon. Some of them, a lot of them were mostly shaped just like monsters. Like gargoyles, kind of a figure like that. Demon figure with horns, and some of them had tails, some of them didn't. Some had wings, some didn't. Some were tall, some were short, some were fat, some were skinny. And they all had different personalities in some case, but they were all still primarily the same. And when they would rape me, they would do it to the point where it would be so unbearable because it would shatter my entire insides. And there was at one point where it was so bad that when it raped me, the other end of their member would come out of my mouth, and it would break my jaw open, it would break my neck open. Sometimes they would just cut a slit in my neck and let that be like that. They ripped open my rib cage. Like it just bursted open. I mean, this has been in my conscience. This has been in my mind for over a year. Surprisingly, I'm healing. I've been healing because I've been surrounded by amazing beings. Beings that are so amazing that every few minutes when I'm with them, I don't remember. The hardest part about hell is when you get out and you survive it every day. The amazing part is I'm 15 months sober. Not that I was into drugs or an alcoholic. I just chose that. I knew that I needed to be more high vibrational and not let things like that hinder my healing. And there were times where I struggled with suicidal thoughts. There were times where it was so tempting. But then I would be so afraid that I could go back there. I don't have those thoughts anymore, but in that time, that was what would go in my mind. And every time when I would think about it at all, my guides were there immediately. Jesus was there immediately. They were there immediately. Archangel Michael or Gabriel or other angels were there, and they would talk to me in dreams, or they would talk to me here because I'm a medium, so I can see them in my third eye. And when we die, that's the eye that we use. That's how we communicate. They were always there to make sure that I would think very carefully about decisions I made. The biggest thing that I'm surprised about still to this day is that I'm actually a better human being now than I was before. And that's the irony to it. I'm more sober than I was before, and I try to be a better person than I was before. And I still think, how in the world am I not hopped up on drugs right now? People say, oh, you need to stay off the drugs. I don't do drugs. I've never done a hard drug in my life. The only drug I've ever done was weed for a little bit, and I hated it, and I never did it again. There were parts in hell where I saw souls, other humans. And there were other people that I saw, which was also children and babies. What I learned very painfully in there was that the Bible is wrong when it comes to hell and who goes there and how. In some cases, it's not entirely correct. Children that are not baptized don't automatically go to hell. That's not true. Children that are brought into Satanism and agree with the guidance and trust of their parents to sell their soul to the devil end up in hell when they die. There are also children that are sacrificed, and when their souls are sacrificed, a lot of the times those souls of that human being is taken to hell immediately. That's what a sacrifice is. I may go into deeper details on that in another video, but that's what I learned right away. Was a lot of those kids were there because they were sacrificed children in satanic rituals and other cult ceremonies. It was very startling. It was definitely one of those things that I will never forget, because I'll never forget some of these children's faces. All kinds of children from all different parts of the world. And I remember that a lot of them had never even known that there was any other world besides that one, that they had never heard of an angel before. And I remember telling them, you can get out. You can ask for an angel. And I would try so hard to ask for some of these children's names, and I would try so hard to remember some of their names. So that way, if I did ever get out, that I could tell the angels in hopes that maybe these kids could be rescued. But then when I would get out, when I got out, I couldn't remember their names, and I began to panic. I began to cry. But thankfully, Archangel Michael calmed me down. He says, I can read your memory, and I can read your mind, and I can remember the kids. I want you to remember their faces, and I want you to try to remember their conversation, and I will tap into your frequency, and I'll try to read this for you so you won't have to struggle. And so we did. It was very difficult for me to let him in, because then he was going to see what happened to me, and that was very difficult for me. It was very difficult. But his face was just love. His energy was just love. Every single being that I've encountered, when it comes to any kind of encounter, when someone finds out in these other realms, They just have sadness and love in their face, sympathy, empathy. And for a long time, I was afraid of letting anyone in. And the truth is, I still am. When you are in hell, you quickly realize that that's a scar that will never leave you. Quickly realize that's a pain that will never truly go away. And for me, even being on earth, still being alive, knowing that I went in there willingly, all because I was so curious, because no one would tell me. And then I started blaming myself, and there's still this big part of me where I do. All the time. And I tell myself, I have no reason to cry about this. I have no room to whine or complain or tell anyone or look for healing, because I put this on myself. It's my fault. And that's what I kept telling myself. There was a part of me where I felt like I deserved it. That no one would care when I was there. That I started believing the lies these demons were telling me, and I started believing in what they said to me. I've been healing. It's been a long journey, and I know it will not stop here. I will continue to be healing. And unfortunately, because hell is a place that I fear the most, demons are always trying to bring me back to hell. They're always trying to take me back there. There have been several times where Archangel Michael had to rescue me because they were trying to take me back. And there was one point where I was almost dragged right back into a portal of hell. It was very frightening, exceedingly horrifying. But thankfully, the other angels were there with Michael, and they were able to rescue me from that. But I'll never forget those moments. If you've listened to this story, I wonder what's going on in your mind when you hear it. Because I know that everyone has a different perception of what hell is. I want you to hear this very clearly. Hell is not what you think it is. Hell is what it will be the second you go there, because it changes all the time. Hell has infinite levels of spaces and places, and different levels of torture locations. Places where it's specifically for children and infants. Then there's places where people are burned, tortured like I was. Then there's places where people are tortured in many other levels that I thankfully was not a part of, but they listed it off to me, and I can't remember all of it now, but there's all kinds of levels of torture. And in those realms, each person is tortured specifically based on their own personal level of thoughts and fear. A lot of people say in the spiritual enlightenment community that hell is not a real place, that it's only based on your thoughts. I used to believe in this lie. I used to even say this at some points because my guides made me believe it, because they thought it would protect me from going there as they foresaw it. Unfortunately, it didn't. And all I can tell you now is that it's not only real, but it's ever so present all around us every day, on this planet and in the other realms at the same time. Earth is like a playground. You are going to be tested. You're going to be tested on your character. You're going to be tested on your weaknesses. You're going to be tested on your courage. You're going to be tested on your bravery, on your empathy, on your apathy, on your love, on your character, on your morals, on your self-respect, on your dignity, on your ego, on your pride, on your greed, on your lust, on everything. But know this, there is no God, like the Bible describes, that puts people there. This is not true. Whatsoever not true. And I know this because I'm also a near-death experiencer. My near-death experience, I didn't go to hell. My near-death experience, I was in a heaven plane. Thankfully, that guided me to my abilities to see spirits and to help people on this planet. But unfortunately, it's also a curse because it teaches you what life could be, but it's not. And so you feel stuck here, knowing what more could be if people would just stop being so selfish all the time. And then when I realized that there was a hell, I understood now, as I do then, that my purpose was to understand both levels of the spectrum of kindness and evil, and how we can choose which side we're on. Christianity depicts this so commonly, but it puts fear in people's consciousness because it makes even children afraid that they will go to hell, and they're forced there just because they don't do this or that, which is not true. No human being, no human soul is ever forced to that plane. No human soul is ever damned to hell by God. It doesn't happen. And any person who says out loud, God loves you, that's why he would do it, needs to really rethink that statement, because that's not love. Love doesn't take you to hell. In my case, curiosity did. However, there are gods in the universe that are benevolent and malevolent. When I found out the truth, it was refreshing at the same time, because it made me realize that we are in control of our destiny. We can decide where we go. But at the same time, it's horrifying, because that means you can decide where your children go. Those children are in hell because their parents thought it was a good idea to worship devils and demons. They thought this was smart. They thought it was wise. They thought it was outsmarting the system of Christianity, when in actuality, they were fools. And they put their children through that. It pains me every day when I see a Satanist and they have their children worshiping Baphomet. It gets under my skin on so many levels, knowing that that precious little baby or child has no idea what those beings are capable of. No clue of how evil they are. And if that child died today, they are doomed. Because the child gave in to that will. Because their parents also sacrificed their children by doing so through their free will. Once those deals are done, it's done. That child is forever doomed unless they were rescued. This is why the Bible is so flawed, because there's so many things about the Bible that are inaccurate on so many levels. There's so many gray areas into the truth of how it works in those realms. It's not like what the Bible describes. There are many things the Bible says that's true, but a lot of it, like 90% of it, isn't entirely accurate or true at all. And I used to be a devout Christian, but then after my near-death experience, I underwent a reality, a transition to understand that the Bible is not love. God is love, but that depends on the God. Which God are we talking about? A benevolent one or an evil one? There's different kinds of gods. So when a person says God is love, that depends on the God we're talking about. I've met Shiva, who is a god, a Hindu god. He's very loving, very powerful. I've met Anubis, who's an Egyptian god, who's also very powerful and very loving, but he's more neutral. I'm not sitting here saying that if you're a Christian that you should discredit your faith. All I'm saying is that this is what I've discovered and this is what I know. When people say to me, you think this or you think that, this isn't what I think. This is what I know to be true because I've been there. There's a difference between a person who says something they believe and what someone actually knows with facts of their experiences. Of course, I can't sit here and show you proof of what happened to me. I can't show you evidence of what happened or anything at all to give you proof of what I went through. But the reality is that deep down in your soul, in your gut, the answer will tell you whether or not I'm telling the truth or not. And that's the answer I ask of you, but whether or not the information is right, whether or not it makes sense, whether or not it adds up. Every religion in the course of history has talked about heaven and hell. Every religion in the course of history, ancient Egyptian, Sumerian, Babylonian, ancient Mayan, centuries and centuries of these types of civilizations that were not connected to each other in any way, all still had these same kinds of celestial experiences, these ascended and descended experiences of benevolent and malevolent entities. All of them have a correlation together for a divine reason, in a sense, to help people to remember the cosmic reality of where we go after this life. What those realities are, to understand the dynamics, to understand the dangers, to prepare us for what's coming next. My biggest purpose in this moment today, sitting here with you today, is to share with you what I went through. And a part of it is for me to heal, but the other part, the biggest part, the biggest, absolute biggest part, is in hopes, in prayer, in this moment, that you hear my message. You hear this. You hear this. Hell is a real place, whether you want to believe it or not. Hell and heaven are real places based not just on our thoughts, but also based on actual cosmic realms. Realms that do exist, that do have power beyond measure to impact us in ways you could never comprehend, in either a very powerful good way or in a very powerful bad way. And it's up to us on that place on where we want to reside in the most. When I hear people tell me that they feel like they are in alignment with demons, it makes me so broken inside, because they have no idea how wrong they are. When I hear kids, teenagers telling me that Satan is kind to them, they have no idea how deceived they are. When I hear adults telling me that demons are good beings that love them and protect them, they have no idea how foolish and how deceived they are. They have no clue. Not because of a religious viewpoint, because I'm not religious. I personally despise Christianity. I don't like it, but I use it as a place to start to give you insight to where it really is, to help you to understand that there is some truth in the Bible. That's why it is so powerful. But the biggest truth that needs to be remembered in this part, in this whole thing, if you didn't hear anything in this at all, and you only listen to this last piece, remember this. You have the power to decide where you want to be. You have the choice of where you want to go. If you feel in any way, shape, or form that you are a good Satanist and you don't like pain, murder, anguish, child rape, molestation, pedophilia, torture, murder, all these things, if you don't like any of those things, then you don't belong in Satanism, and you don't belong in hell, and you don't belong in those areas of energy at all whatsoever, even with demons or devils especially. Use your common sense. You don't belong there. They are not kind whatsoever. They have no kindness in their bodies, in their energy frequencies. They are lying to you. They are taking you for a fool because you are silly enough to believe in their lies, like I was in some case, even when I was tortured by them. But even when they protected me, they still allowed me to be tortured. That's not love. Open your eyes. And I say this also in an awakening moment. This is my testimony. This is the truth. This is not my truth. This is the truth. I've been in hell. I've seen it. And I will never forget it for the rest of my existence, ever. I'm okay in this moment now because I don't want to be a victim. I try so hard to fight that pain because I'm still being surrounded by so much love and so much healing, so many amazing, beautiful souls that are helping me remember the good things about me that I had forgotten, that I still ignore, that I still reject, that I still think are lies. Because that's what hell does. It puts you in this horrible place in your mind to make you believe you deserved it. And shame on people that would even say, even now in this video today, that I did. If you say that, you're a fool. I am not going to apologize for my emotions in any part of this video because all these emotions are sound. There's parts of me where I'm calm. There's parts of me where I'm numb. There's parts of me where I'm I'm in pain and I'm crying, and then there's parts of me where I'm pissed off. Oh, and then I'm also grateful for knowing the truth so I can tell people what these guides should have told me in the beginning, but they didn't, and that's where a lot of my anger still comes from. And I know a lot of people say, that wasn't Jesus, you were lied to. Yes, it was. Unless you speak to these beings, you don't know how it works on these realms. You don't know. And what you read in your Bible, I don't care how many verses you spit at me, none of that shit matters. What I would dare you to do is to go ask your pastor these things and see how fast he recites all the fucking same verses. How little of an answer he really or she really knows, because they've never been there either. And those that have know, religion has nothing to do with hell or heaven. The only thing about religion that helps in any level is to identify in some case on these dimensions, but not entirely, not even close. Barely an inch to scratch the surface of the truth, of how it works. There's so many gray areas. There's so many things within these realms that you can't even comprehend unless you were there. And in a part of me, I'm angry when people say this to me, because how dare you say that? How dare you think that I make it up? How dare you think that I'm lying? Why in the world would I lie about this for a fucking view? I don't like being believed or being told that I'm crazy. That I should be put in a fucking padded room, because I know I'm not crazy. If I was crazy, I would be in a padded room. I'm completely sound in my mind. I know how to differentiate the difference between those realms and this one. I didn't make it up. I'm not hopped up on drugs. I've never done a drug in my life. And I'm not schizophrenic. People say that too. I've seen plenty of doctors. I'm not schizophrenic. And they've all told me I'm fine. But hear this too. Whenever you think someone's crazy when they tell you these stories, you need to comprehend the amount of courage it takes to come out and say these stories. Being plagued with the reality that most people in the entire world will never believe you. So you're plagued in your mind, telling yourself, just keep it inside, don't tell a soul. But I refuse to live in fear about that anymore, because I refuse to allow their ignorance define my sanity. There are people that claim to be prophets. I don't claim that. There are people that claim to heal the sick. I don't claim that. There are people that claim to levitate and fly and do all kinds of magical things that are literally not possible in the human mind unless it's through like possession or poltergeist activity. Again, I don't claim that. For the person that does believe this, what I ask is that you take time to think about those souls in hell and pray for them. I do it all the time. Deep down in my heart and my soul, I'm always wishing and hoping that someone's saving them right now. Even one, a child, a woman, a man, anyone. The biggest tragedy about our expansion in the human consciousness is not that we expand and that we know so much. It's that we expand and yet we do and know so little. I don't want to believe that this was true. I still tell my guides, I still talk to them in dreams. They'll visit me in my room, they'll walk to me in my room, and I just burst into tears and I'll say it wasn't real. And they'll say, yes, it was. It was real. And that's the hard part, is I want to believe it's real, because then that means all the good things that I experience are real. But then I don't want to accept the good things, because then that means I still have to accept what happened to me in hell. And that's the fight I deal with every day of my life. Fighting with that reality of knowing that you cannot accept one without the other. Otherwise, it's pure denial. Crazy people wouldn't recognize that. I do, because I'm not crazy. Some people may be wondering, how do you go about your life every day knowing you went through that? How can you do it? It's one moment at a time. And in the beginning, it was extremely hard. I wanted to give up. I wanted to stop everything. I wanted to end my life at some points. But I also knew that's what they wanted, because then they'd win. And I didn't want them to win. Because even though they tortured me physically and soulfully in many ways. They couldn't crush my will to survive. That was the biggest thing that I was able to overcome, was surviving it, even though I didn't want to, but I knew I had to. For my daughters, for my family, for my friends, for people that love me, and to know that this story had to come out eventually, in hopes that even if it saves a 16-year-old kid who thought it was a cool idea, then it's not in vain. When people say they believe in God, angels, and they believe in demons and all that, but then when you tell someone about it, people automatically think you're crazy. Not everyone, but there's a lot of them. And I always think to myself, wow, it must be nice living in that realm of ignorance. I used to be that person. I never judged anyone that came out with their stories like that, but at the same time I never really heard those stories, and I started realizing why. Because people are too afraid to come out and tell their story. People are too afraid of the backlash, the mindless attacks from total strangers every day. But more than half of those people are also haters that have nothing better to do with their lives. The irony too is that a lot of those are also Satanists. I mean, I saw horrific things that would put grown men in psychiatric wards. I've seen things that would make you commit suicide because it was so painful to see. I've witnessed levels of anguish and pain, and I've experienced it myself in ways that I wish I never ever did. I don't know what else to say here. I just know that I have to get this out because I know deep down it needs to be said, it needs to be shared because it matters. Not that I necessarily matter, but that the message, that what could happen to you matters. Other people have gone through this experience. I know I'm not alone. Just like when people have a near-death experience and they say they've seen hell, well, unfortunately, I went to hell by choice. And I was a fool. And still to this day, I wish I never went in there. But at the same time, I know so much now that it's useful information to give to you in hopes to protect you and to save you from a horrible fate that is definitely avoidable. It is avoidable. And it doesn't have anything to do with sin. It doesn't have anything to do with damnation or a God putting you there. It doesn't work that way. No benevolent being ever in the course of existence would ever damn you to that place. Ever. They never will. Because they love you that much, no matter who you are. Why tell anyone? Why bother making a video on it? Doesn't matter. But then I think about those people, and I think about those kids. And I think about if they could have been spared, if their parents or someone just knew and they heard the story. I know that my story is different from others, and no person's testimony of being in hell should ever be compared to. Everyone's is different because there's different levels of how torture can happen. So really there is no right or wrong for someone's experience of heaven or hell. There's so many different ways it can go. It's infinite. So I want to just end this video with thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And more importantly, I pray to listen and to hear it and to know that this is coming from a person who painfully went through a horrible mistake. And I just hope that it helps you and saves someone from the same fate. My biggest wish at the end of this is that you listen to this message, you listen to the story, and you listen to the most important thing, is that you have control, you have control, you have control, and you have a choice of where you want to go. And more importantly, that if you don't want to go there, don't. No matter what. And no matter what someone says, if you have a similar story, if you have anything remotely the same, you're not crazy, because I'm sitting here telling you today I went through something similar, and you're not alone. And I hope that this message brings you peace. As crazy as that sounds, I know, how could this video bring a person peace? Because at the end of this video, you will end it and you will close it and you will walk away from it, thinking about the possibility, thinking about where it could lead you, thinking about diving deeper into the cosmos, diving deeper into your thoughts. Maybe you'll just shut it off and you'll think, man, this bitch is crazy. But the fact is, it's going to make you think, and that's what this is about. is to make you start asking more questions. So that way you don't end up in a situation like I was. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to be curious, to force your guides to give you the right information. Don't be afraid of that. And if they tell you there's no hell, they're lying. Don't believe that for a second. If any person on YouTube or people in books saying there's no hell, they're lying or they're deceived or they're in pure denial. The most important thing that I learned from all of this was that no matter how horrible, no matter how heinously horrible everything I went through, that love healed me on so many levels and is still doing its part, is still healing me on so many levels. And I feel that healing. That love is so unbelievably pure, unbelievably powerful. And I had no idea how much love can truly change even that. Not make it disappear, but help you to see the good in you and not the bad. God didn't save me. Love did. Love saved my soul on so many deeper levels that I could ever imagine. And not just the empty word of love, but the actual feeling of love from these entities that have been with me through all the healing, through my whole journey. And if it wasn't for them, I don't know where I'd be. I'm pretty sure I'd be deep in bottles of alcohol or drugs or suddenly becoming someone else that I would never recognize anymore. I know it was love. And there's still that wall there because even now it's affected my relationships with people. It's caused me to try to protect myself because I'm always afraid that even a being or a human that gets too close to me will see the horrible things about me from that past. But then there was a moment last night. I've been around this new being and we were sitting under the stars in this dream world, this place. We were on swings outside. And I loved being near his energy because he felt so safe. He felt so home. He felt so warm and secure. I felt protected. I felt good. But every time when he would get close, I got really scared because I didn't want him to get too close, because I didn't want him to feel me. Because if I could feel him, he could feel me. And that's how it is in the energy frequencies when you die, when you're in these other realms. That's what it's like. There was a point where music was playing out in this field. And then he held out his hand. He wanted me to dance with him under the stars. And he kept offering and offering, and I kept saying no, I didn't want to dance. But deep down, I really wanted to. And then at some point, we did. He helped me remember all the good things about me. I suddenly forgot everything that happened. Whenever I had a memory or a fear, he made it go away. And he reminded me that what I went through wasn't who I was. He reminded me that it doesn't define who I am. And his love really started to heal me again. The good thing I discovered out of this was that no matter how much you go through, you're still worth fighting for. You're still worth it. That love doesn't see the pain, doesn't see what you think you see, what you think is true about you, all the negative things. That love from other beings, that love is so pure and so positive, it's so good, it's so healing, it's so vibrant, it's so lively, it's such a force that you end up getting so lost in it because it feels so amazing that you never want to leave. And then suddenly all of that pain is gone and you think to yourself, how is that possible? It's because we all carry love, and so do other beings in the other realms. And as long as love is always there, there's always hope. And I end it here. So I wish you guys love and light. Thank you so much for watching my testimony. And I hope that it reaches you in your heart in some way.